Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session, Jay. Thanks for having us on the Ecosystem webinar platform. I always love spending a good Wednesday afternoon, hopefully debating and having some fun with this topic. I actually wrote an article hoping to prompt some real debate, and it's been very quiet there on the LinkedIn waves. But I see there's quite a few people that have joined us here. So I entice the audience to jump in and be part of this conversation because it's a topic that we're all kind of grappling with. Provocatively saying T&M is dead, certainly getting people to sit up and question things. I've had some really interesting conversations with some ex-colleagues that are part of a large consulting business, and even they are starting to realize they're a big global software development business, and their customers are starting to say to them, you know what, give me a proposal like you would a year ago before the tooling was there, and now give me a proposal with the tooling and show me how much cost you're going to save me. This is from one of the UK businesses, and this is what their procurement in the large organizations are saying. So there's a lot of pressure on vendors like us to start looking at, when we deliver a proposal that's got professional services, to not have this open checkbook called time and material. Now, it obviously comes with a bit of a tail because, if the vendors have to play their part and you're working with these large enterprises, the large enterprises need to play their part. So I've got Jay and Neil to debate this with me and work through this. Obviously, Jay really well, but from the ecosystem code point of view, we've got a really powerful platform that's an AI code generation tool that is really going to support the theory that a lot of the unpredictability of writing software kind of goes out the window when you've got such powerful tools that bring in so much predictability. And then I've got Neil, who's joined the Exidian team as our Chief Revenue Officer. He comes from a rich history of system integration sales, from his Dimension Data days and his synthesis days, and has spent a lot of time closing great deals on time and materials. So I'm excited to hear how this conversation can go. Welcome, guys. Let's get into the really uncomfortable question. If is dramatically improving software delivery predictability, Jay, does time and material still make sense?
You know what, I think it's going to be a reality in our immediate future for still some time to come. And maybe the way to look at this is that think of the role of the doctor versus the musician. We had a bit of a discussion just before we kicked off now. But if you think of knowledge that gets frozen in time and then gets shared with people based on kind of intellectual capacity, where you can get the answer to a critical question immediately, is probably going to be worth something in the interim or for a period of time. Let's just maybe be conservative and say that it will be available for next many years. But that means that if you really have a challenge and you want somebody to diagnose a problem and you know that they might know it, will you rely on a tool to do it for you based on a consumption fee, or would you be interested in getting a human to provide you feedback? And would that human then charge you for the skill that they've acquired over the years? So if you're a doctor, you spent 7 studying, 3 years internship, you've got a practicing mindset of learning as you go. But maybe you see the person who has not ever seen what you have, and you know that there might be a tool that can diagnose you. So when would you decide to buy it as a service or as a value-based approach, or when will you decide to pay that person for the hour of assistance? So I think that in the tech world, if you think historically where all the time and material came from was for skill augmentation. You've got an organization with people that you know that you need to run your company continuously, you probably would want to employ them full-time on staff. But if you're going to have a specialist project that you're busy migrating somewhere, you would want to have access to somebody that knows how to solve a particular problem or deal with a particular technical situation. And then you are willing to pay for that. And the price to pay is almost always based on the level of scarcity. So what's happened with companies like Microsoft, who flooded the market with the certified technical specialist kind of credentials, meant that anybody could participate. So what it did was it pushed the price down of a person who had that generic credential versus the person who was a specialist Oracle DBA only working on mainframe technology in a very specialist scenario, or if you are a straightest Voss architect, still today, it's unaffordable to get people like that. So that means that I think the scarcity problem is what we kind of came out of and what we got used to. Now what's happening is that scarcity challenge is being rebalanced. And I think that is what's then creating a trigger point for how much can I charge you as a technical specialist. And let's say that I'm an AWS certified architect with 10 certifications. It means absolutely zero in the modern world, because in the modern world, the technology that was updated last week, last month, or maybe even this morning, I have instantaneous access to if I have a person with a technical systemic understanding with an AI tool compared to the person who did their certification 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, who is no way is going to keep up to date with every possible combination of new versions of what's coming out. So I think that there's an enormous, it's almost like a groundswell of change coming, because we are normalizing out this concept of where everybody used to be centralized around high degrees of technical skill that is now being flattened out. And I think that's creating, at least for us, a new way of thinking about it, is to say that how do you make something that used to be frozen fluid, and how do you make it accessible to people that historically never had access? So that is what's going to put it under pressure.
Neil, listening to Jay's answer, what are your thoughts? Do you think the industry is ready for some sort of shift, some sort of change coming out of the world that you came out of? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting because, I come out of a different world from where Jay and ecosystem come from, because it was more helping clients build product. Jay's, ecosystem is a product you take into market. So when we looked at market opportunity, time and material existed because it was a means to mitigate a risk. And in any commercial negotiation with a client, it was who's going to take on the greatest risk. And if you can't get me a data set that is fixed, I can't determine the end result. So I have to mitigate that risk by billing you time and materials. And I look at the context of predominantly project work. And we had a squad of engineers of different skill levels, of different levels of seniority. But because the client couldn't give us either a level of predictability and a level of a static environment where the scope was not the scope was fixed. That's the word I'm looking for. It was impossible for us to actually take on that risk without going time and materials. So I'm just looking at it in the context of the world that I came from. Going back to your question, there's a big shift that needs to happen in order for this move to happen on the client side, and how they contract and how they're ready to contract in that way.
So Neil, it would be a minute for you to think about, like, let's take the ecosystem stack just for a moment. We've got on the one end a product that is an empirical product. It means it contains human frozen knowledge that for us to create new algorithms is inherently an act of research of a human finding new answers that has got a tiny portion of AI capability because of the fact that it's empirical. And then you've got the other side of the business where a large portion of what we do use our own AI tools to accelerate the implementations. Is that I think that the degrees of unknown that I'm interested in specific is like the SaaS spot. Let's take that as an example. Classical enterprise software products used to bolt on and acquire and add 1,000 features when any one client might use 10 or 100. And then the implementation cycle was this enormously unknown journey of attempting to find out what the company is going to do in relation to how it's going to fit the product. Isn't it maybe that paradigm is now being questioned and saying that, why should I buy a platform or product with 1,000 features? And especially something that is more generic enterprise process-based, like, credit processes or CRM or value management or onboarding or any one of those that doesn't require necessarily, a complex intelligence journey, is that you can make something that is far more known now.
Yes.
How does that, because that's one of the things we grapple with, is how do you...
And so the concept, if I've understood you correctly, Jay, you can actually, instead of you going to buy off-the-shelf products, you can build it yourself because you've got the tools to do so at a fraction of the cost. Whether a question I think what Matt's aiming at is that for us in industry who are helping clients do that and move along that journey towards build or buy, is how do we contract to them? Because as you quite rightly pointed out, if you build it yourself and help clients to take advantage of that, which is one way, Or if you're going to help the clients build it, which is more the lens that Exidian comes from, how do we contract in that world? Because I suppose the ideal business model, certainly from a service provider point of view, is to build the product and sell the product as a product, because that's where you maximize your margin and value. And we are not quite in that camp yet, but we've built a few things that we're hoping to productize over time. But at the moment, we just got a call to a big, large insurance client earlier today. They specifically contracting us in to use our skills to build their product. And it's that contracting model that we are wrestling with, because, and that's the T&M debate that we're having with our clients, actually.
Yeah. No, I think what you're raising, something that we think about all the time, because the reality is that if you have a technical specialist, and I think that's kind of what we're grappling with here, is that if I'm deeply specialized in the field and the skills that I needed to get the specialization is directly available, I'm probably more at risk than somebody that understands how the system works.
Yes.
How the business system fit together, what the moving parts are, because I now know that I can enable agents. McKinsey, they say they got 60,000 employees, out of which 25,000 of those are agents. So that means if you get your latest McKinsey job done, that you're going to pay a premium price for, it's highly, highly unlikely that a human did any of the work, because they know that most of their work is generic, but contextually relevant. So the role that the human plays is to understand that business system and then apply the technical skill in the of an agent. That historically was done by middle tier of the consulting world that was heavily focused on the time-based challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't wake up in the morning and go, sheesh, I'd really think what would be valuable for the business is 10 more developer hours, right? But we do want to prevent fraud, or we want to sell more of our services and our products, you know, and those sort of things. And I think as technology vendors, we want to do the same, right? We want to go in, we want to own the build, we want to own the architecture, we want to say, hey, this is what we've done, it's beautiful, it's artwork, it brings all these components together, and it delivers an ROI. We don't always get to control that, though. It makes it difficult. Neil, tell me, yeah, go for it, Jay.
I ran into my heart surgeon in the airport, and I asked him, where was he going? And he said he was going to a medical AI conference. And I said to him, how's that? And he said, just imagine that we solve all of the heart disease problems that exist in the world today. He said, what am I going to be doing? He said, I've got a big house on a hill. I've got a new kid, you know, with my new wife. I've got alimony to pay. I mean, basically, this is how he was talking. And he was saying, I've got the sports car in a garage. I mean, I'll make sure the people have got heart disease. Otherwise, I don't have business. He said, I mean, I don't have a business. So if you ask me to tell you what to eat, I want to say, eat as much cheese as you like, you know, pick a smart dough, just do whatever you eat meat, you know, just make sure you're hard, because otherwise I don't have business. I said, for me, churn is a problem. To one heart, I want to be able to do that same person at least 2 or 3 or 4 times. Otherwise, I don't have revenue.
Yeah.
So you're never going to ask your doctor or your heart surgeon for advice not to ever go back to them, because they're not going to tell you. And I think the tech world sits with the same crisis, is that, you know, even though we might not think that we need to go back, but we're trying to find ways to stay valuable and sticky. We almost rely on the fact that the business is going to be under constant change, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's constantly chasing it, right? You know, it's like, I mean, we're lucky we're a young growing business and can be fairly nimble. But if you look at some of the businesses that, Neil, that you come from, and Jay, you've also had big consultancies. Can you imagine saying to a business with 15,000 or even 500 developers that I remember my old boss used to say, our currency is developer hours. And when they go to sleep, our currency stops. Can you imagine trying to get them to shift? Because if the customer base starts going, oh, actually, I want an outcome, I don't want a timesheet, then how do we grapple with that? Because then you could do cost base and then add a whole bunch of fat, because that's when you get pulled into a RFP process and they say, this is fixed bid. We all know, cool. We get our smartest guys around the room. We get them to do estimates, whether they're t-shirt sizes or whatever they do. And then we add 50%, or depending on how big the client, and if we really know the client, it might be 100% of fat. And that's how we go, just to protect ourselves from a risk point of view. But you know, there's certainly a shift, because hold on, tooling's bringing predictability, but the predictability is not always just in how complex coding can be. It's also how long are you going to take to give me the data that I need.
Matt, you broke up there just for a second.
On that basis, if you were in a massive organization and you had all these people, including juniors, who their jobs are being consumed by these AI generating tools, because juniors need to learn the basics and the fundamentals of coding, because when they eventually become the seniors, they can then watch the agents code and make sure that the agents are doing the right thing. But if they're not getting the work because the agents are doing, I mean, how are we managing this world?
I can give you a quick glimpse of how I kind of see the product service dilemma. That's where I find that our reasoning at least give us some answers. That's the economies of scope versus economies of scale. Because if I have a tool, and let's take the ecosystem code scenario for a moment. If I have a tool that comes with an ability to provide you with packaged knowledge to accelerate your own value creation process, it means that if I charge you $30 for 1 million tokens, because my measurement point is not an hour, but it's a token, the reason why the measurement is a token, because it's a consumption-based infrastructural cost that I need to make a margin on. And that means that the knowledge that was used for me to be able to construct on top of that sits in the margin on top of the token. And that's why you see what happened in the AI world right now is that Anthropic and OpenAI and Grok and everybody basically tripled their prices in the last 6 weeks. It's created enormous crises in organizations that are now dependent on token-based consumption, and the prices just went through the roof. But that means that at the scale, if I can sell 1,000 people a solution to a common problem, then my margin is okay. And that the value that they derive from what they pay for is a fraction of when you're going to do it at economies of scope. Because economies of scope is that if I provide you assistance based on something that is, very unique or specific to you, you might still want that biological system that is accountable and responsible, that cannot come to you and say, oh, it's the agent's fault. Oh, it's the platform's fault. Oh, it's the database fault. You want somebody that is totally and utterly accountable, that that you can go and do, a deal with, that is going to be reliable, because it's the fact that I interpreted what you need to do. So I think that the intersection of scale and scope at least give us, because we still do assistance for clients based on, listen, it's not pure time, but the point is that for value-based output, that you allocate a certain time because you only have so many hours in a day that you can help them with anything. So I think that for us, we separate it like that. So that gives us some understanding then of what you then need to focus on where. Because if you want to build somebody an entire system and you can do it for $30, and they know they can do it for $30, can you charge them $10,000 for the same job? And that's the question, isn't it? Is that it's the price point of getting some of the work done is getting at a level now where the value that you bring might just be that you are human.
Yeah, and that you actually have neck to throttle when things are going wrong.
Sorry, just before Nicola's question, there's also a comment in the chat, Matt. I thought you could put your eyes on it quickly and just respond to that. Sorry, Nicola.
Okay, so Elizabeth's piece of string type of question. Previously, we used time to measure the value of the deliverable. Now we need to define always paid for things that they use that they could do themselves. Car washes, they're always willing to pay double to fix the mess that you made. Non-experts using AI automation tool will build things that balloon and burst. We should either find a way to communicate this or wait to charge more at the aftermath of that burst.
That, no matter, I was just going to say, so your line is maybe cutting out a bit, but I was going to say that there's this kind of thinking that has been very much alive in the Soma part of San Francisco and the south of Market, the kind of downtown area. And that is that the $1 billion valuation person company is a reality. What does that mean? That means that the non-technical expert getting all of the work done for startup to build into some kind of early commercial success can be done with a human with really good tooling and understanding of how the world works. And I think that if things break, how does it then play out? If it's a bit like the Claude Code scenario, because Claude Code was built by one person, not by a team of people. And the challenge at the moment is that most large organizations still sit with decision by committee. And that's where the hours are burnt. The hours are burnt in the unknown by you going from committee to committee meeting that are 6 weeks apart, for people sitting around trying to do arbitrary things that are completely valueless. But that is in the context of managing the old system that was entirely wrapped around the fact that there are too many humans in the organization. And that's why I've got layers and layers and layers of risk management, where in the agent world, I could create deterministic infrastructure that could make things a lot quicker, faster, and more executable. But maybe you don't want to do that right now while you make money. That means that if that is the case, I've been dealing with 1 or 2 startups now. I'm chatting to some people again in the Wharf and places that are trying to build a 10-person bank. And the only reason why they are 10 is because they're not allowed to do it with 1. So that means, is that a reality future that the non-expert is going to be able to get that done or not? I don't know. That's kind of what everybody is debating, right?
Yeah. Neil, your thoughts?
Well, I'm just conscious Nicola has had a hand up.
Hi.
Hi, can you guys hear me fine? I'm just in the car. I had a thought because I actually received an email this morning from a company called Click or something, not a very original name, but they said that they were basically advertising this AI tool to me that would take over blog writing. It would manage all social media posts and generate them and publish them across platforms. And I replied to the email kind of with the intention of being a little bit provocative. And I said, okay, well, what's the point of me then? Like, are you advertising to me to have myself replaced with AI? And then their response was, no, not at all. We're not replacing you. Think of it as you become the editor and you manage staff writers. And that kind of reminds me of what Jay was saying about how everybody kind of would shift a level up towards system level thinking, which is very much the job of an editor, like thinking about the broader storyline, the broader goal of a publication. I was also thinking, okay, cool, like I could only just take up the role of an editor because I've worked under one before and I know how an editor's role is supposed to look, but also because I've done the grunt work before. I'm wondering that it's in the next era, none of us need to do the grunt work anymore. And we have a new generation where they've never had to do the research, they've never had to write the articles, and they just automatically move into an editor role. How are they going to know what needs to be done? Or is that just going to be completely redefined as well? Those are just some thoughts that come to mind of this conversation.
I think my view is that I think of what is the purpose of work, and it is to achieve an outcome. So if you had to think about, historical waves of inventions and how inventions have solved various kinds of problems that we have created for ourselves, because if you think about it, the laying the railway line resulted in people inventing, various kinds of locomotives. That is a separate business model than people that then put goods on the locomotives versus putting humans in there to get from point A to point B. But if there was somebody that invented a teleportation, why would you want to spend any time on any travel mechanism? Doesn't matter if it's air or car or whatever, the entire set of industries redundant. And I think that what's happening at the moment isn't that where the business models are being rethought, is to say, well, the reason why I need an army of technical people and a whole bunch of things that needed to be done is, I'll give you a classic example. I've got an OpenClaw agent that sits on one of our server infrastructure, one of our servers in our data center. And when I'm out on my way to dinner with my wife, I say, I said somebody complained about a feature on our product. Please go retest this feature across all possible features and do it at 100% coverage and tell me if there's anything that I should look for. I tell it that over WhatsApp, that then sends it back to my OpenClaw that runs on a server. It has first right access in the context of read to go check the entire source code base. It runs all the tests that historically been done by somebody in the interim that had to listen to me, somebody that had to interpret it for the tester, somebody had to explain what to do. Then I had to get the DBA to check the database. I had to check the code coverage person to check the code coverage. I had to get the testing specialist to make sure they get it done. Then I had to get somebody to build me a PowerPoint. Then I had to get a meeting into my calendar a week from now. Then I had to get an army of people to do stand-ups every day. Now what I do is I just say to it, please get it done and tell me within an hour. Before it starts, I just check it, come back and say, oh, that was the problem. Okay, fix that. Only in that case, make sure that only that line is changed and let me know when you're done. Off you go. And that means for your swarm of agents that do the work for you historically would have been, a whole, that's why I think of, Matt, you and I chatted about Agile. Agile's too slow. You need 2-hour sprints. You need 10 releases per day. We release all the time. You can't do sprints. I mean, that's too long. But yet, it was designed to deal with a human inertia. You know what I mean? I think that's what's going to happen. So I do get that some roles are going to get reconstituted. The person that understands why you do it and understands what the outcome is that you're expecting, they're the ones who are going to keep on winning. Not often us who are the deep techie specialists, because a lot of what we do can be replaced. We largely as highly specialized people, because you know that at some point, some AI is going to do it better. But the person who comes up with a brand new idea that has never been thought of before, that an AI can't do, is what's going to win.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But
it's actually...
Go for it, Neil.
Sorry, Matt. As you were talking, it made me think about you saying that in the world of Agile, it's clunky because of human inertia. It's not quick enough for agentic inertia. It's the same with T&M in the world of corporate. I mean, T&M was designed for corporate inertia because of the levels of governance and systems and processes and people that you've got to deal with in order to get things done. Inherent delays, and not like short delays, like potentially months of delays. You start to question is, okay, context is key. Who are we dealing with? If you're dealing with startups, you can have a different language to tier 1 enterprise financial services business versus a tier 2 or tier 3, a digital startup bank or a legacy bank.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the purpose of, sorry, man.
Yeah, just going back to the Agile world, I was chatting to an ex-colleague. That whole Agile transformation world is now just rehappening again. It's this AI transformation world, right? So we're repurposing people. Somebody was telling me there's a new role called an AI janitor. What Elizabeth was saying in the chat is once it makes a lot of mess, then there's a whole bunch of AI slop. The AI janitor can come in and you understand the engineering and understands the system, can go and clean up the crap. So I see the space because our clients are now saying, well, you the AI guys, come and teach. We're not taking on any more developers. We are going to take on the tooling and we're going to build this out and we're going to do spec-driven development. And so I just see this new wave of transformation. But if I look at the last wave of transformation, the scaled Agile, no big enterprise really got Agile right, because there's still these blocks of production times that you have to wait. And so it's never true Agile. And what they would do is they'd say, hold on, no more project managers. We only want Scrum Masters. So all the project managers had to resign from their jobs and take a certification in Scrum Mastering and then reapply for their jobs. So I see a lot of that coming.
But Matt, think about what is the purpose of a stand-up? Or what is the purpose of a retrospective? Or what is the purpose of getting your backlog groomed? 99% of all of those activities, and it doesn't matter if you look at waterfall all the way through to Agile approaches, had to do with the fact that there were too many humans in the system.
Yeah.
And what you had to do every single morning as a Scrum Master with some managers and some people who understand the product would all yak on for 15 minutes. In most cases, those stand-ups last for an hour, discussing things that there's no chance that those people are going to get the job done that day, and I'll just complain about it the next day again, and that carries on for 10 days solid until you then move the deadline to the next week and the next week and the next week. And then a year later, I was, but hang on, I've overrun. And then it was because the humans just kept on talking about stuff rather than one person with a full system understanding getting the job. I'm thinking that this new way of thinking, and that's going to put the whole time material thing for me personally, I think, under pressure more than anything. And that is that the person that understands how things work and then can take all the jobs that needed to be done, if you take jobs to be done, the work as an output that used to burn hours because of the dependencies of waiting for one core skilled person or one core set of people that need to get the job done, and automate those from days or weeks to hours or minutes. I think that is creating a massive shift in thinking.
Neil, Penny, for your thoughts.
Jez, I mean, the thing that I'm wrestling with is it's good that we're wrestling with this. I'm just thinking about our customers. I'm thinking, our corporate enterprise customers and how are they wrestling with this? How are they grappling with this transformation in operating model that's coming, and it's coming thick and fast, but they are exceptionally slow to move. But it does, it talks about industry disruption because, the wave of digital transformation, as we called it, it was the ability to reinvent yourself quickly in order to stay relevant. I still worry about some of these big enterprises, who are so cumbersome and so slow to change ways of work. That's the thing that keeps on coming up in my mind is, it's one thing talking about this in the way we engage customers, but are they able to change in order to engage differently?
But Neil, isn't it also that I think it comes back to this issue of risk because, the cases that are currently playing out, even the lawsuits around the world where AI were involved. I mean, I don't know if you saw that even in places like South Africa and so on, the AI policy was, written by an AI tool that money, when actually 100% of the references were wrong. Deloitte in Australia made a mistake and McKinsey made a mistake in Europe recently. So we know that is still then creating a tension in an area where you want the human in a system that's going to want to do something, and that is slowing it down as well. There's some people with a sense of pessimistic reality where maybe I'm a radical optimist, so that means that I'm going to want to change at a certain pace that is sometimes almost impossible, for companies to deal with. But that meant the risk. I think we do underestimate the amount of pain that people go through to be able to make sure that the enterprise stays safe. Because if you think of the purpose of a bank, the purpose of a bank is to take money from one place and then make money by selling it to somebody else. If you had to look at NRI, if you look at NRR, it's around, can I build infrastructure where you can perform actions and for me to keep a fee? And at the core of it, the theory is that, it's not complicated if you had to look at it as individual components. But when you put together 20,000 simple things, that's the definition of complexity. And at the moment you see a complex system, I think that's the risk of not knowing what's going to impact what and for what outcome. The human just wants to slow things down.
I think that's exactly where big, and I'm going to say legacy enterprises have their biggest risk, is because digital disruption is what ends up eating you. It's death by 1,000 cuts. A startup's a 10-man bank that starts to operate like a Capitec, who starts eating your lunch and eat it quickly. Suddenly your world starts disintegrating. If you can't adapt to the new world of operating quickly, you do risk. And Jeff Bezos, he lives by the mantra, you're never too big to fail. That's the healthy fear that you've got to have, is because so many enterprises do think exactly on those lines. We're too big to fail until it's too late.
Yeah. So, Neil, you also brought up the worry around risk and people. And in an ideal world, if you created a consultancy to guide our enterprise clients to be able to take on vendors that want to deliver value outcomes, what sort of advice would you give them? What would you say to them? What do you need to change? And remember, procurement's going to be in the room, and they don't really like you sales guys. I know from first-hand experience.
Matt, it's like me trying to ask them, well, what are you going to do to get rid of your mainframes? It's such a complex question. I don't think we have a simple answer. As much as you say, it's easy to say, guys, you've got to change your operating model, you've got to change the way you engage, your procurement, your governance, your systems, processes, etc. It's a mammoth undertaking. And to be honest, I don't have an answer to that question. How would I advise a bank? I think you probably... Carry on, Jay.
Let me test an analogy with you. And I like to use this when I've got students, typically, especially business students in a room. We often debate this. Think of the issue of getting from point A to point B, because you need somewhere physically, and you need to make a decision as a human as to how to get there. And let's say that your decision is that you want to drive there and you don't know how to drive. The instinct then is to say, well, let me go find somebody that has to prove that they've driven a car 10 times. You've been through a couple of RFPs yourself. You go through and you have to prove that you've driven a car times. You have to prove that you've driven maybe that same route to get to that outcome 10 times. You have to prove that you know how to operate gear stick, pneumatic, and you have to operate a truck versus whatever. And you prove the 100 things that somebody in the enterprise has figured out that might have eventuality to get from that point A to that eventual point B that you need to get to. Everybody starts submitting all their options to say that, check, I can drive better than they can. And the entire concept is around how to do things.
Yep.
So let's just park that story for a second. And now let's look at self-drive car.
Yes.
Now,
Good idea.
there is no how. It's irrelevant because I can get you from any point to any other point because the algorithm is reliable. But now the question changes. Now it's, well, am I going to go to the right point where I need to go to? So I think that the shift now is far more focused on the why I'm going where I'm going, how I'm going to get to where I decided I need to go. And I think that shift historically was centralized around a handful of people who used to decide that with companies, with decision makers as to why they do what they do. And now the why is being thrown completely open because how is being compared at a radical cost of zero.
Yes.
And the mechanisms that I use, I'm not going to ask you how many times have you driven or what have you driven. I'm going to ask you the last set of people that you dealt with. Did you get them to a destination that was good for them? How am I going to measure that? And that is going to create then the value outcome. I think that is going to shift because in the how many hours do I need to drive this car to learn how to use it? And I need a consultant to do it for me. So it's an hour-based thing. But if it's going to go to me driving somewhere where I know that if I drive to point B, my economic benefit is 10. And if I drive to point C, my economic benefit is 100. Can the person that tells you to go to point C then say, well, let's take the gap of what your expectation would have been and give me 50% of that. Give me 45 instead of just paying me the one that you paid me to show you how to do it yourself because you started the why. Now we work together on what the why is. So I think that even in our business, we do a lot of work on where you are going and why do you need to get there, not necessarily the how you're going to get there because that is being compressed.
Yeah, it's a good conversation to have with clients there. Oh, do you also think there's, what you're also touching on there, Jay, the element of building change within a business in pockets and showing value in certain areas and small kind of quick win areas and getting them to show value because it's a little bit like the advertising of Uber. You know, nobody really heard Uber being advertised on the radio on billboards, but everybody shared a great experience. And you know, if you can create that social sharing based on experience and positive experience on outcomes being delivered quicker and measurable outcomes, there's a way to infiltrate a major corporation for the good.
Yeah, I mean, that's an example. If you about the Uber thing, the Uber thing initially, if you listen to us, we told the story when he started the business saying that, I mean, I used to use Town Car in New York or Halo in London. You know, there were a couple of kind of digital, but when you waited for them, it used to take 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You still had to take your credit card out of your pocket. And his entire success was built on two key attributes as to why you do what you do, because you don't want to wait for more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
And you don't want to take your credit card out of your pocket. That was it. That was the entire business model that he created initially for the business was on two key attributes. And everything else got invented around it. Where I think sometimes what we do, and listen, I'm probably one of the bigger people who do this, overcomplicate things with 1,000 steps of getting things done, where the customer just doesn't care. The client doesn't care.
Yeah.
They just want to know, find me the attribute that's going to make me more money, save me money, or make me protect my money. And what those attributes is what I'm after. This other stuff is noise. I don't care how well you do it. Just get me there.
100%.
Yeah, it's often like if you want to know if you're doing something properly, ask a young person, like a 7 or 8 year old. This is what I've got to do for a bank card or a bank account. And they will start asking you the why question. And you'll start realizing how much crap we've put in the way of giving a really great service. You know, how to overcomplicate something so much that, and I think what's going to happen as you see the younger generations come through is they're completely dismantling these older models. And I mean, I would love to know what my daughter's going to do when she has to go into a shop to buy things and it's not on the phone, click, 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 and then watch checkers arrive. Is I mean, I even got lost looking for stuff the other day because I ended up, actually popping into the shop. But all of these things are going to break traditional models. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about breaking a traditional model because it doesn't suit the way that the world is moving.
But that's like music if you think of the delivery of a service as a product. Think of the time when you had to build yourself a vinyl bookshelf or a shelf where you could put your vinyl. Then you had to build one for your cassettes. Then you had to build one for your compact discs. And you had to physically go to a retail outlet. And then you had to go stand at the listening station if you don't want it to just buy what was already being sold to you or forced down your throat. And then you had to go and listen to a whole lot of variety that you can only spend maybe, let's say, an hour or how many hours you can realistically spend inside a music product store. Then you had to physically acquire the product that somebody shipped there with a logistics infrastructure that was made in a manufacturing plant that's going to use a laser disc of class 1 type laser of all things. Class 1 means it's radically dangerous unless it's completely encased. That's going to then play that product to deliver the service for you. And that's why when kids look at this, they go, well, it makes no sense. You know what I mean? Why do you need a copy? I need a copy. We all need a copy to listen to the same thing. Can't we just have it in one place and we can all consume it anytime, like from anywhere we like, in any context we like? So that whole productization into the services world, I think, is adding to this completely, isn't it, Matt? I mean, that means that the business models are evolving, but we just don't necessarily know exactly. That's why I quite like the music story, because there was a time when somebody had to go and stand in a soapbox in the middle of a square, and physically there was no way that you could productize music or any service you consume while time is ticking.
Yeah.
So if it stops, it's done. You can't say, well, yes, I've got a bucket of music I'm going to take home with me, until we had the cassette or we had the vinyl or the CD, and then it became productized. And we now back into the services world. Yeah. And that's why, Neil, like you were saying, the digital world of delivering a digital service that then reduce your cost of delivery, but increase your scale and economies of scale. I think the answer lies somewhere in there. We just have to figure it out.
But it's interesting you say that, because we're going into the service world, and if you look at the young people and you go through all the surveys, they much prefer to pay for an experience than have an asset. And we know that. And I think that's probably part of this conversation. But I look at one of the large consultancies, the technology businesses that I've worked for, they're trying to grapple with this time and material thing, but productizing software delivery. So they've got this platform that they've built, and you buy from them some upfront consulting, a prototype, and then the build. And it's all through a platform. Now, I don't know if it's really clever marketing and just a really nice way of commercializing you buying a product, or if it's their genuine way of getting away from time and material to say, we'll give you a fixed outcome. But then there's a lot of things they've got to have. They've got to have delivery responsibility and all of that sort of stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. But I do think that one of the immediate answers lie in that packaging of, I have solved a set of problems up to a certain level that would take you, Mr. Client, 10 times longer than if you just buy it from me out of the box, because I've spent years doing this. And I will continually maintain this in a context of a specialization, and you then buy the service bundled with what I have to offer. And that's what OpenAI and Anthropic and Palantir, those kind of companies have done with their business models. So, Matt, I think that there is definitely that we see coming out of clients, where the people that make the product, like OpenAI, big clients, they spend $20 million a year in service fees on top of their license fees. And they build a lot together to get them to a known outcome, but you sell it as a bundle. So you don't have the time, as in people having to clock in every Friday on their timesheets how many hours they spent. But you measure it on how many people in the company have now been to adopt something new or apply it in a context that's beneficial to them. So I do think that there is where one of the key answers lie, because think of like our business. We find that like with the ecosystem code that you mentioned at the beginning, is that anybody can go and generate themselves a Salesforce equivalent or some product like that. But if you look at the failures that we've seen in those kind of implementations, like we've seen companies spending 5 years trying to implement a Salesforce, a product. The 5 years is spent probably 4 years and 11 months on people talking to each other about stuff that they shouldn't have been talking about in the first place. And that means that whole cycle of getting things to work. Somebody else has invented it all and then just given it to me. I think there is a new thinking process that is playing out there that I think we're all acutely aware of, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we're coming towards the end of our time. Any contributions from the audience members before we start wrapping up? I know there's bits in the chat. Any comments or thoughts or questions for the panel? Nothing. All right, so wrapping up, I want Neil to give me a little bit, if you were talking to a vendor right now and they were grappling with this and how they get their head around giving value to their clients without taking on massive risk and moving away from time and material, what advice would you give them? And then Jay, I want you to do the same, but give the advice to the enterprise.
Just reframe that again, Matt. So giving advice to another...
To an Exidian type business, or I can see there's some other, I can see Elizabeth's on from Monkey and River. If you were giving advice to a tech business that's grappling with this world of giving value to a client and having to take on risk because of moving away from time and material, what sort of advice would you give that vendor?
I think the most challenging part of it is trying to figure out what business outcomes clients are looking for. That's always got to be a starting point, because in order to show value and to build a case for change and build a delivery model that is outcome centric, you've got to understand what those outcomes are. And often clients don't understand that as much as we think that they do. So really to spend a lot of time unpacking that. And then also in building the case for us, pay for the outcomes, make sure you've done your homework in terms of the complexity of the environment that you're getting into. And understanding client architecture, client dependencies, business models, etc. But also just pick up on bite-sized chunks, one at a time. That's, in my view, some of the key elements of approaching it. Okay. Moving away from a T&M type engagement towards a business outcome.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And Jay, take us to the end. What would you say to an enterprise, whether you're talking to a CIO or you're talking to a head of procurement? How would you advise them on getting the best value from a vendor in this manner?
First thing is that if you're dealing with somebody that's going to think about solving a certain problem more than you can realistically, then they should make themselves more valuable than the people who just provide something that's mechanical, because the AI world is going after intellectual labor. Intellectual labor means that if anything is highly generic and can be replaceable, you will be replaced. So that means that I think step one is that can you exhibit, show, proof, provide proof that you can provide a subject or something that is close to their hearts more than they know they can realistically do, and that's why they want to be with you. The second thing is that all enterprise is that the inertia is a bit factor pulling. That means that you got these pet projects that happen in corporates because there's a specific person who got in their minds that they're going to work on something. They work on it for a year and they know that if they stay there, they can't go up the structure. That means they're going to be actually trapped, organizationally stuck. They give it up and nobody else is willing to take it up because it was somebody else's project. So what happens is that you got this pet projects that start and die all the time. We see it in all of our clients globally, that everybody have got the value of these projects. And a young executive who's never been through one uses that project that they're busy working on as a way just to get out of the area that they are in. So the decision that you have to make as a company who talks to them is to say to them that, okay, well, if that is the case, I will help you to find the best company to do it for you. But when you get to the next job, I'll be there to help you to get to the next level, because that means you're going to be around for a while. But if you're not going to be around for a while, then do it that way. But if you are, you need somebody that can give you continuity, because continuity, I mean, we found it already, like in our ecosystem business, like in our recommenders and nudges and so on. We, in some clients, have out-survived 3-4 CIOs, 2-3 restructures per year, job changes that happen every 3-4 weeks, because you've got a concept in an enterprise called hysterical hyper-inactivity.
Yeah.
And hysterical hyper-inactivity is the task and the job of looking busy. Because if you don't look busy, you're not useful. And you look busy by using the right people to work with you, so that you can take the ideas that are in your mind and make them work for you. And that means that can we be the group, the people that you work with, to get you to a point where you can show that you are way more productive and produce outcomes better than anybody else. So I think that the AI world is enabling that. far more so. And I find that execs that I've had discussions with this in the last couple of weeks, and I just got back from Turkey and speaking to banks and people around the world. I definitely get the feeling that the reason why the senior person wants to use it is to raise the game. And the reason why the person wants to use it inside the enterprise is to stay more relevant so they can raise their game. And that means that it's your job as a person that provides a service or a product to an enterprise. Your job to make them more productive, get more of their outcomes. So we don't understand why they're going where they're going, then we're irrelevant. So I think that amplified importance of the trusted advisor, or understanding how you become the person that is trusted to a system and getting to outcomes, is then at the end of that journey first priority. And that means that if you are tooling or humans, for now, I think that the debate is still open, because
100%.
I'm actually reliably.
Yeah, awesome. I know we're out of time. Thanks, gents. A really, really, really great discussion. I'm going to hand back over to Jess. Thanks for the audience and the questions and participation. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that great chat.